speaker, Cassidy Mahon, and Cassidy is a student of the BSc in Psychology. So the floor is yours, Cassidy.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Cassidy Mahon and I am a final year BSc in Psychology student from the University of Limerick. Today I'm going to present my final year project or my undergraduate thesis, Implicit and Explicit Sexism, Occupation and Toys. I carried out this research under the supervision of Dr. Andrew B. Moynihan, a lecturer here in the Department of Psychology. So first I'll explain the key terms that will be used throughout this presentation. Explicit attitudes that are controllable, they require cognitive resources, and they're made with awareness. An example of this would be me asking you what's your favorite color and you answering blue. This answer requires you to think about it and actively answer. These would be attitudes that you readily share with your environment. In this research, explicit sexism is measured through two scales: the Ambivalent Sexism Inventory, or the ASI, which measures ambivalent sexism towards women, and the Ambivalence Towards Men Inventory, or the AMI. Ambivalence is when someone holds contradictory feelings about something. So in this case, these scales measure both benevolent sexism, which is sexism that appears to be complementary but is actually rooted in traditional sexism, and hostile sexism, which is outward prejudice towards a group. Implicit attitudes, on the other hand, are subconscious. They are out of our awareness and out of our control. An example would be having a negative experience with older people and so feeling that all older people are bad. These attitudes are harder to see from the outset, however, they can influence our behaviour in subtle ways. These attitudes are measured using the Implicit Associations Test, or the IAT. So, implicit bias is measured through the reaction times of the IAT. Participants are required to sort 4 categories of items into the corresponding category using the keyboard keys E and I. So, in this research, there are 2 IATs. There's one measuring the implicit gender stereotypes towards occupations, and another towards toys. In the occupation IAT, as you can see in these pictures here, the categories are men's names, women's names, manual labour, and hospitality sector. In the toy IAT, the categories are men's names, women's names, vehicles, and dolls. I would explain the occupation IAT here. So the first block here presents the participant with names that they must sort into either men's names using the E key and women's names using the I key, as you can see up here in the top left. The second block shows the participant occupations that they must sort into manual labour, a hospitality sector, again using the E key for the left and the I key for the right. The third block shows both the names and the occupations together. Participants may be presented with either the compatible, which is the middle one here, or the incompatible condition first. The compatible condition is when men and manual labour are sorted using the same key. The incompatible condition, down in the bottom right, is when women and manual labour are sorted using the same key. This is incompatible because women and manual labour stereotypically don't go together. So blocks 4 and 5 over on the bottom left show the participant the names again, but on the opposite sides for practice. And then finally, block 6 shows either the compatible or the incompatible condition, so that each participant receives both conditions, but in a random order. Participants who take longer to sort the items correctly in the incompatible condition compared to the compatible condition are more sexist regarding the target category, so either occupations or toys. The IAT is then repeated using the toy condition, replacing manual labour with vehicles and the hospitality sector with dolls. The IATs are randomised so that participants can get either the occupation or the toy IAT first. So, after removing participants for various reasons, such as inattention or not completing the study, I had 214 participants. After the participants read the information sheet and agreed to the consent form, they were asked to fill out demographic information. So my most common age was 19 years old, and 90% of my participants were 25 or younger. 72% of participants were women. 86% of participants were attaining the undergraduate degree. Most participants, at 44%, were in a female-dominated university course, with 39% in a gender-neutral course and 8% in a male-dominated course. Only 4% of participants had not lived in Ireland, and finally, only 6% of my participants were parents or guardians. So next, participants filled out 3 questionnaires. The first one was the Ambivalent Sex Inventory, which measures both benevolent and hostile sexism towards women. Here are a sample of the 5 items of the 20. They then carried out the Ambivalent Towards Men Inventory, which measures ambivalent sexism towards men. Here's a sample of the items, and this one had 22 items. And finally, they carried out a 5-item questionnaire that measures awareness of gender inequality. This scale is a subscale of the modern sexism scale, and so will be referred to as MSS in the results section. So after filling out these questionnaires, participants then carried out the 2 IATs that I mentioned earlier. So following my background into this topic, I came up with 8 hypotheses. I've also put some reminders of how explicit and implicit sexism are measured at the bottom of the slide. So first, I expected to find a positive correlation between the sexism scales and the IAT scores. I predicted that gender would influence IAT scores, but I did not have an expectation for whether men or women would display more implicit sexism, as there is a lot of conflicting previous research on this topic. I anticipated that gender would moderate the relationship between implicit and explicit sexism. I expected to find a negative relationship between awareness of gender inequality and implicit sexism. I also expected a negative relationship between awareness of gender inequality and explicit sexism. I anticipated that those who were in the gender minority in university would have a higher awareness of gender inequality, especially women who were in a male-dominated course. I expected to find a positive correlation between holding implicit gender stereotypes for stereotypical occupations and toys, so in the two different IAT conditions. And finally, I expected that being a parent would influence individuals' implicit and explicit sexism, especially in the toy IAT condition. So I'm only going to discuss the results where the hypotheses were supported. So the first significant relationship I found was between awareness of gender inequality and the occupation IAT. This is a negative correlation, so this suggests that when the awareness of gender inequality scores go up, implicit sexism regarding occupations goes down. Because of the nature of this correlation, this also means that when occupation IAT scores increase, inequality awareness decreases. I did not determine which score causes the other in this research. Similarly, I found a significant negative relationship between inequality awareness and the Ambivalent Sexism Inventory, which is explicit sexism towards women. As this was also a correlation, this suggests that when one score increases, the other one decreases. Again, this analysis does not determine which score comes first. The most interesting finding, in my opinion, is that parents or guardians showed higher implicit sexism towards toys than their non-parent peers. It is important to note that this study does not examine which came first. So does becoming a parent make you hold gender stereotypes towards toys, or are people who are more sexist towards toys more likely to become parents? It is also essential to point out that I only had 13 parents take part in this study, so these results must be interpreted with caution. I just want to give a slight trigger warning for sexual violence mentioned on the next slide. So the main reason I carried out this research is that I wanted to make people aware of their own biases. For example, I received feedback from some parents who became concerned about the toys they were giving their children. This is exactly what I wanted, as I want people to confront the biases and hopefully to change their ways. I also wanted to reduce gender biases and stereotypes. So gender biases affect us all, although mainly women, through systematic issues such as the gender pay gap, and through safety concerns such as the Me Too movement. Very recently, the sad and shocking death of Sarah Everard in the UK after she was kidnapped and murdered has reignited the conversation about the prevalence of sexual assault and harassment towards women. I hope to add to this conversation through my research. The trigger warning is now over. So, as with all research, there are some limitations to this study. The use of online data collection, while it allows for the study to reach further and was possible during COVID, also comes with drawbacks. I could not control the setting for the participant like is expected in lab research. So some participants may have taken part in the study in a loud house, while minding siblings or children, or while multitasking. Thus, they weren't given the full attention and concentration to the study. The sample itself is also made up of mainly female undergraduate students. I only had 13 parents take part, so therefore the sample is not representative of the general population. The participants themselves may also have influenced the research. So the social desirability effect suggests that participants will change their answers to make themselves look better. So participants who know they are sexist may have changed their answers in the explicit sexism scales so that they would appear less sexist. And finally, some research suggests that there is a modest relationship between IATs and explicit attitudes, suggesting that the IAT might not be the best method of examining implicit attitudes. So my results found that when inequality awareness increases, explicit sexism towards women, and implicit sexism towards occupations both decrease. Thus, we as a society should be aiming to increase this awareness wherever and whenever possible. For example, policies and workshops in schools and workplaces should be put in place to boost awareness, while also encouraging dialogue about sexism. A potential reason that parents are more implicitly sexist regarding toys may be because they are constantly surrounded by messages that these toys are for boys and those toys are for girls. Toy catalogues, TV advertisements, and even the aisles in shops tell parents that they need to buy their little boys' action figures while their little girls need dolls. By changing the way toys are marketed towards both parents and children, it will become more acceptable to buy children the toys they want because they want them, not because society says they should want them. So, to sum up, sexism is still prevalent in our society. We need to do whatever we can to reduce the sexism, which in turn would improve the lives of everyone around us. I found that those who are more aware of gender inequality are less likely to display explicit sexism towards women and implicit sexism regarding occupations. I also found that parents hold more implicit sexism towards toys than non-parents, but this result must be interpreted with caution. These findings will have implications for the policies in schools and workplaces and also suggest that the marketing of children's toys should be altered. Thank you so much for listening, and here are the references that I mentioned today.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. That was excellent and again, so timely.